Robert Plank Show, episode 357. Buy and grow online properties with the website investor Jeff Hunt. Hey everyone, and thanks for listening in. We're talking right now with Jeff Hunt, and Jeff makes his living online by buying and growing online businesses. He's purchased over 300 income producing websites since his first buy 10 years ago. And Jeff is the author of The Website Investor, which is a guide to building passive income buying revenue generating websites. So, Mr. Jeff, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks very much. Love to talk about this stuff.
Cool. And I mean, I gotta admit, like I've sold like maybe one or two websites that I built myself, but I feel like, and this was like years ago, and I feel like I kind of like built things the hard way. I had to like think of, actually I think I had to think of like maybe 10 ideas, build maybe 10 different websites, and then maybe only two or three of those panned out, and then some of them kind of made money and then died off, and then maybe out of those, maybe one of those is one that I sold. And I love this idea of kind of some of these stories of people buying a website that's maybe underperforming, that way they can hit the ground running, and swapping some things around or combining stuff, or just putting in ad money or doing whatever to grow the site. So I'm really kind of excited. And so can you kind of tell us about this whole, like, buying revenue generating websites, or buying and selling websites, and kind of what your take on it is?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who do it, and some people are brand new. And for brand new people, it can be a really good thing because you don't have to develop all those skills that you probably had to work on, like to become a designer and a tech guy and a business guy and a marketing guy and all the hats that you sometimes have to wear to actually create a website and then make money from it. And so for new people, it can be good if you pick the right site, and that's all that's kind of the secret sauce, is making sure that you get one that's a good one. But it can really jumpstart your move into online business if you're new. And then if you're a little bit experienced and you already know, for example, like how to make money with advertising, you've had some experience with it, maybe you've had your own site or have a relationship with someone who really knows that business, then even for lots of experienced people are buying websites as well. So it's kind of a game that anybody can play, and there's risk in it. Obviously, you can buy things from someone who's just trying to rip you off and misrepresents things, but if you do a little bit of homework and get another set of eyes on things, you can come away with some sites that can really have consistent earnings from the very, very beginning.
Awesome. And so, as far as this, like, there's different people kind of specialize in different areas of, like website flipping or buying and selling. So, am I hearing you right in that is your specialty in just buying an existing website and then kind of running with it and using that to make money, or do you focus on other areas too?
Yeah, I mean, I got my start in the internet world about 10 years ago, and my intent was to kind of buy and hold and buy and operate. And that's what I did. I actually bought a Google News website. Well, I'll tell you, my first purchase was a flop. I spent 1,500 bucks on a site. It was like an affiliate site of some kind, and it just didn't work, didn't get any traffic, and I kind of lost it. But my second site, I'd done a little more homework and I bought a Google News site, and the seller was great. He taught me what kind of articles I needed to publish, how to make money from it, where to get writers, all that kind of stuff. And I earned my money back in like 2 months, and then I did really well with it in the following month. So that's kind of the game I'm in now. Over time, as I've bought a lot of different kinds of websites, I've developed expertise in certain areas. So there are certain kinds of things that I now do start from scratch just because I know what I'm doing. And it's and it can be, in some models can be really easy to start from scratch because you may not be dependent on Google traffic or some things like that take longer to develop.
Right, makes sense. And so you mentioned in there, like, you had those two little stories, right? You had the first attempt, which was a failure, just kind of winging it, and then you had the other go around where you were more successful. And so that first time that you mentioned there, where you bought the site for $15,000, and then it was sort of like a dud site. Can you tell us, like where you found that site, what was it, and sort of what happened there?
Yeah, and actually it was 1500,
Oh,
but
sorry.
it was on Flippa, and everything looked okay, but it was like an affiliate site, and the guy was selling like I think it was like phone services of some kind, like like AT&T and T and Verizon and so on signups, and so the commissions were theoretically going to be really good for those signups. But he was using paid traffic, and he had an AdWords account, and as part of the deal, he was supposed to give me his campaigns that were already set up, and he did. Excuse me, he did give me all the information for the campaigns, like the ad titles and ad text and all that stuff. But I typed those things in, and I started my own AdWords campaign, and it just never ever got. I did a lot of research and studied how to improve it, and I couldn't make it turn a profit at all. So that was kind of the problem with that one.
Okay, so
And
you went on and Flippa, and I've seen Flippa, I've seen these other marketplaces like Digital Point, and I've seen a lot of like sort of low ticket sites like a few $100 sites, or they had like affiliate links, or they had some kind of monetization like you mentioned in there, and I've definitely seen some of these sites where the traffic sort of looks fishy, and they say like look at all these graphs, and maybe there's a spike in traffic, and I've heard some of these kinds of horror stories where there are people, their sites are being sold, and then the traffic looks okay, but then someone buys them, and then it turns out that the traffic was fake, or the traffic was from some other source, or like you mentioned, they gave you the campaign, so to speak, and you duplicate the campaign, and then you say, well, that's sort of weird. I did the exact same things that they did in their ads, but it's just not paying off. And so, I mean, what are sort of those early lessons that you learned from that failure right there?
yeah, I mean that's good. A lot of we're talking about Google traffic, organic traffic kinds of websites, and in this discussion, um, and and that kind of thing can be faked. I mean, of course, the very first thing that you look at is Google Analytics. A lot of the sites on Flippa don't even use Google Analytics, and so it's much harder to validate anything. And of course, Google Analytics can also be faked. But what kind of a key technique there is to combine different kinds of information, or rather compare them. So for example, if it's an AdSense site and there's some metrics about the number of AdSense page views, then you definitely want to look at the analytics data as well and see, they're never going to match exactly, but you want to see that the analytics is saying there's a similar number of page views in analytics as there are in AdSense, for example. And then if they give you AW stats data, then you can look at that as well and kind of just do some cross comparisons. If they say that they're making X number of dollars per X number of page views, then you can kind of look at the actual number of dollars they're making, and then do some simple math to say, well, that should be this many page views, but there's 10 times as many page views as that, or there's only like half as many page views as that. So you kind of look at the information they give you, and if they give you enough pieces, you can kind of see whether it adds up and whether the story is straight. So that's one of the tools. Another one, of course, is kind of researching the seller himself a little bit. A lot of those guys are completely anonymous, and that's a strike against them. But if there are people you can find on LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever else, or if they share their personal website, that gives you a little bit more confidence that the person is willing to put themselves out there and be known. So a little bit less likely to outright scam you. So those are a couple of tools. Then there's also external tools like Ahrefs and Moz at OSE Explorer that can give you other information about the domain, what they think about the backlinks to the domain, and if there's the traffic but the backlink profile is very weak, that's kind of unusual and suspicious. So I mean, if it's organic traffic, so those are the kinds of tools that we use and that I teach about in my courses on how to address the traffic problem. And of course, there's other things that you're evaluating when you look at a site to buy too. The content itself, is it unique or is it plagiarized? And the domain ownership, is the guy trying to sell it, the guy who owns it, and then studying kind of the other contingencies and people involved in the site, like if it's e-commerce, who the suppliers are, and will those supplier relationships come over with the site that you're buying? Just a lot of things like that. And it might seem a little overwhelming, and it is a little bit, but just it's kind of common sense, and business is business, even if it's a website. Still business. If you just kind of think through it one step at a time, you can uncover a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, and as you were explaining that, I was sort of thinking of different like sort of analogies to business, especially because you started off saying first to if you have like information in multiple sources, like you said, if they give you different like Google Analytics plus AW stats, right, like the same website traffic but looked at different programs, it almost sort of sounds like an accounting audit, or just like looking and seeing like, well, is this number add up to this, or if they move this into that, does that make sense? Or if you kind of say, well, if they get only this small number of clicks and they claim it's making all this money, it's like, well, are they really making $1,000 per click on their site? Or like that makes perfect sense to kind of do that audit, so to speak. And then you said number two, research that seller and look up their name, look up their company, and see, are they anonymous? Well, that's bad. Are they in LinkedIn? Do they have an established online presence? And that's I mean, it makes perfect sense, because if you were buying a business or something like that from somebody and they wouldn't even tell you their name, or you couldn't find any sort of footprint about them, that would definitely raise a red flag in the real world. And then you mentioned those external tools like Ahrefs to kind of see, look at their traffic and see if they're doing anything sort of shady or black hat, or if there's kind of any baggage there with the site. And then the content and the people. So what other pieces need to run to make that thing work. So that all makes perfect sense once you explain it. And I mean, you said that it might seem sort of overwhelming, but for me, I was thinking like, well, geez, where's even the starting point, right? Like there's this website. Well, where do I even think to do? So even though for some people it might seem overwhelming, it makes sense to me, because now at least some of the gaps are kind of being filled in. And so that was sort of the bad story, right? The buying it on Flippa, there were some problems with that. And then you went and you said you bought a Google News site. So I have to admit, I'm not sure what a Google News site is. So first of all, can you sort of explain that to us?
Yeah, Google News sites are sites that have articles that appear in the Google News portal. So if you go to news.google.com, Google has sort of curated all of the news that it considers official news or real news. And so Google News websites are slightly different in that they have to be manually approved by a Google employee to be eligible to be in Google News. And kind of the advantage that gives them above other sites is, if I'm sure you're familiar with SEO, and if you have a normal website that's not a news site, an article is only going to rank high in Google if it's been around for a while, it has some authority, it has backlinks to it, and all of those things. But when you have a breaking news article, the thing's brand new, and Google recognizes that. So, it's a brand new article. It's not going to have links. It's not going to have authority or age. And so if you're a news site, then Google gives that article some extra weight. So like a news article can appear number one in a search result, even if it's brand new, only because it's news. So Google gives that special designation to those news sites because it understands that the regular Google algorithm wouldn't work for a news article. It's just they're two different animals. So so if you happen to own a Google News approved website, then your news articles can get ranked really high, both in the regular search results, and they can also appear on the Google News portal itself, which is kind of like Yahoo News and Bing News and those kinds of things. So back in the day, for probably 6 or 7 years while I was doing news sites, can make a lot of money in news just by cranking out as many articles as you could that were relevant. And today's, people still are buying news sites today, but Google has changed their news algorithm a little bit to make it favorable to the bigger publishers and not so much to the smaller publishers. So it's harder these days, but that's what that's about. So, that's what I learned about. I quite honestly, I got into it because I sat in on a webinar and this guy was explaining Google News and how you could get like amazing things ranked in just an hour. And he even did one on the webinar, like right while we were watching. And it was fantastic. And then he, at the end, he pitched this $500 course on how to get into Google News. And I thought, oh man, I could spend this $500, but then I'd have to go actually create the thing from scratch, get it approved by Google, and then learn learn the ropes. And that seemed risky. So I thought, well, I wonder if I can just find one that's already approved and buy it, and I did. It was just, again, it was on Flippa this time again, because the lower cost websites that you're going to buy are going to, Flippa is still the primary resource for that. It was on Flippa, and I think I paid $3,500 for it. So it wasn't a ton of money. And as I mentioned earlier, when you find a website with a seller who knows what they're doing, that's worth as much as the website, because really you're educating yourself on the process, the business model, and how to make money. And so that's what happened to me, and bought that thing. It was gold. It lasted for 9 months. Then Google kicked us out of news because we were like, probably exploiting them a little bit, writing some articles that really they weren't very newsworthy. But I bought another site. I mean, since then I've probably bought a dozen of those, and I've probably built another half dozen of them just in that niche alone.
Super cool. And so, as you've had all these successes with buying established websites, well, first of all, I'm understanding more and more the advantage to buying a site that's already rocking and rolling, because like that whole process that you described of getting onto Google News and getting accepted sounds like just like sort of a hassle. So if you found a site, and even though today it's not as effective as before, but even if you found something where it's hard to get set up, or it takes a while, like you have to jump through hoops, why not just buy a site that already has those things in place? So I'm really curious about, as you've bought and ran with some of these sites, I mean, what sort of like lessons or what sort of commonalities have you seen with these winning websites?
Well, and part of that question is related to another one I get all the time, like how much do you pay for a site, or how do you determine what it's worth? And so what have I gleaned over time? And most of that is that when you buy a website, you're really looking for stability and predictability. And so the more stable and predictable the future income is, the more that people are willing to pay for the website. So one thing I've learned is that when you look at a website listing and it shows the traffic graph or the revenue and net income graph, the graphs tell just a ton. Just at a glance, you can see if the traffic is pretty steady and growing, if the income is pretty steady or growing, or even flat is okay. Flat for, and how long has it been around? If the thing has pretty flat traffic for 2 years, that's a pretty good sign, because things change really fast in this business, as you know. So if a site's been around a couple of years and it's had pretty steady traffic for the last couple of years, that's really good. It doesn't mean that something bad couldn't happen tomorrow or next month, but the chances are a lot better that things are going to look good for the following year or two. And so that's one of the most important things to learn in this business is you don't look for necessarily anything that's like just going great guns with a steep upward curve, because you just, things that go up quickly come down quickly. So look for stability, look for consistency. Another really important thing is, what you're buying actually is a business model in most cases. Like somehow or other, a seller has figured out a system for producing consistent revenue. And and so what I'm looking for a lot of times when I buy is that I'm looking for the systems, like, oh, how did this guy do this? He's making $500 every month and he has for 2 or 3 years. And so if I know if I buy that site, I'll learn his system and I might know a thing or two that he doesn't know. And maybe I can make that five into to $700 or $800 a month and immediately grow the value of the business by 40% or something like that. Or maybe I'll just learn a new system that I didn't know, and maybe I can employ some of those techniques into my other businesses just from what I learned. So those are a couple of things.
Super awesome. And as you're describing some of that stuff, like how you buy some of these businesses, and then you first of all buying a business that has been proven to work, and then you might add in some of your own secret sauce. Have you gravitated to any particular type of websites? Like, do you have a favorite? Like, do you like the content sites better, or the like apps or anything like that?
Yeah, I actually have found over time, I've bought e-commerce, I've bought dropship, I've bought affiliate sites, and I really am I'm finding kind of a content guy. I like the process of creation of content. I understand, and I'm pretty good at optimizing advertising and adding on extra revenue sources. So yeah, I've sort of gravitated to content over time. Although I've also bought software businesses, and I've had a lot of success with software, but there's customer support issues and you got to upgrade the stuff over a period of time because it doesn't work anymore with newer platforms and those kind of things. So I've dabbled in most every business model, and a lot of them. And people say, well, which one should you pick? Well, it really just is what you're comfortable with, kind of what you can get your mind around and see yourself doing on a consistent basis. But yeah, I've kind of gravitated towards content.
Okay, cool. And then once you buy these sites, how hands-on are you? Is your goal like to just completely automate it with like virtual workers, or do you like to participate in it, or what's your thought process there as far as how much to do yourself versus how much to delegate?
Yeah, I mean, I love to find sites that don't require a lot of work, and of course, everyone does. And in fact, even website brokers tell you that the more passive, the more hands-off the site is, the more they can sell it for. So, most of us are looking for the same thing. But to me, the passive income site is not totally passive. It's one where usually you buy the thing, there's a transition period, you learn the business, you experiment with some tweaking of the site, try to optimize certain things. And so typically you put quite a bit of effort in at the beginning. I mean, you might have to hire the right people or, find the right freelancers and develop a process or improve the process, improve the site itself. So a lot of what I aim for is kind of front end work. And then with the idea of, keeping it as hands off as possible after that. And as I sort of alluded to, there are certain ones that I bought, like particularly software where, customers expect the software to work. And if it doesn't work, whether or not it's their fault or your fault, they want help fixing it and stuff like that. So some of these things require more involvement, just depending on the details of what they're doing and how they've set it up.
And you mentioned there that software and sometimes software breaks or goes out of date, or even if those things don't happen, sometimes they're more trouble than they're worth. And you also mentioned that with some of these content sites, some traffic methods such as Google News might sort of dry up over time, or there might be some sort of slap. And so I imagine that sometimes you buy some of these web properties and you kind of do your thing with them, but then after a while, like maybe you get bored with them, or they might have run its course. And so do you ever look to then resell or offload some of these websites if you're tired with them?
Yeah, I mean, these are good questions. You're absolutely right. Yeah, that I mean, one of the key reasons for me to sell is exactly that. It's like it's more hassle than it's worth, and I might have gone in thinking I could do it more easily, or I didn't know that there were customer service issues or that kind of thing. And so that's one of the key reasons to sell. And another one is if you just if you're interested in something else, or if you want, one reason I've sold in the past is actually trading up, where I have smaller sites, they're doing okay, but I would rather not have my effort spread across too many projects, and so I'll sell the smaller ones and then raise some money and then buy a bigger one where I can have more single-minded focus on it. That's another important reason to sell.
Awesome. And all these sort of like, making these big chess moves and having this kind of strategy, it really interests me because I mean, a lot of us get caught up in this the day to day, and I'm trying to make my website and I'm just grinding. And I really like just this idea of going for the low hanging fruit, finding a website that's already working, and then seeing those sort of opportunities where you can build it up or streamline it or grow it or even look on a way out of it later. So I really like this idea, and I like a lot of what you've had to say and a lot of your sort of insights here. And I'm really curious about your book that we mentioned at the beginning of our talk, and about your websites and anything else you have going on. So can you kind of tell us about if someone listened to some of these interesting stories and these lessons that you had to hear, had to say today about buying websites, where should they go to find out more about you and maybe buy some cool stuff too?
Yeah, my book is called The Website Investor. It's on Amazon, and it's actually a formally published book, so it's in a few stores, and you can find it online. And it has some good stories in it, where I try to actually share what really happened in story case study format, as well as some of the details. But if you really want to see more of the hands-on, I have a video course that I sell on a site called ownoptimize.com, Own Optimize, and I go through all the details of how do you evaluate a site, how do you find low-hanging fruit opportunities, and some of the things earlier that we talked about, like how do you make sure that the traffic is real and not scam, and those kinds of things. So all of that's covered in the online course and at Own Optimize. You can find out a little bit more about me at heckyeah.org as well. So that's those are the tools for website investing.
Great stuff. And so, if you've ever been curious about website investing, or you have seen a site and you say, "Ooh, I want that site," or "I want a similar site," or maybe you've been hungrily looking through these flippa marketplaces and you just say, "These sites look okay, but I'm not even really sure what I'm looking at. I don't know if I'm, shooting in the dark, or I don't know if I'm going to buy a site and it'll, peter out 2 days later, or it'll be a great investment or not." And you need some guidance, you need some training, because I mean, heck, you wouldn't buy a business without any research. You wouldn't buy a house without being in the house first. So the same is true online, and especially online, because as we said, online things move very fast, which means that you can buy a website and then a few months later do whatever else you want to it. But if things move fast, then things are also risky. So you need that expert guidance to help you get there. And Mr. Jeff Hunt is the guy to help you get there. So make sure to go to ownoptimize.com. That's OWN optimize.com to get all that information you need to know about website acquisition, so you can get your first income generating website going and making some money for you. And then, as Jeff said, go to heckyeah.org to find out more about him personally. So ownoptimize.com, heckyeah.org, and we've been talking to the website investor, Mr. Jeff Hunt. So I want to thank you, Jeff, for stopping by and sharing all this cool stuff with us today.
Hey, Robert, it's been a real pleasure. Look forward to spending time with you in the future.
Awesome. Same here. Please subscribe, rate, and review our show at robertplank.com/iTunes, and like us on Facebook at robertplankshow.com.